This module is going to be about your website and your podcast name. Now, this module might run a little long, or there's going to be a lot of information that you might not be able to kind of, understand fully in this first round. But don't worry, there is going to be a resource down below where you could download this exact file that you see on my screen. So that way, after you watch the module, you can go back and you can look through everything. Okay? So now the first thing and the biggest question I get when I'm helping other podcast, people pretty much start their podcast is, do they really need a website? Now, when people ask me that, I just want to slap them across their face. Guys, it's 2019, okay? When I'm recording this, it's 2019. You might be watching it in 2020, which is even worse if you ask me this question then. Is a website important? Yes, 100% a website is important. And I'm going to show you why it's important. Now, that being said, let's talk about podcast host websites. Now, we'll talk about why it's bad, and we'll talk about podcast host in the next module, but just understand that that is not the route you want to take. You want to have a nice website that's original, again, just like your cover art, that's different, that stands out, and that is built for you. Okay, so you don't want to use something that 100 other people have out there, which is going to be, what your podcast host company will provide you. So that being said, let's go ahead and talk about, a website. So the first thing is domain name. I need you to understand what a domain name is. So domain name, like you can see, it's www.podname.com, just like www.google.com. That is what we call a domain name. So right here, this right here is a domain name. Okay, guys? So that's a domain name. So when it comes to picking out not just your domain name, but also your podcast name, there are a few rules that you should follow. Number one, short and simple. You want people to remember this when, they're out talking to their friends, when they're out, maybe watching a movie or something like that. Your name should be easy and, very short. It shouldn't be something like, how do airplanes work in the nighttime when there is no light in the sky? Or something stupid like that. No one's going to remember that. Let's be honest, okay? No one's going to remember that. A good podcast name may be Happy Dose, right? Evil Salesman. Those are good podcast names. And the second thing about those podcast names is they're catchy, right? Again, when it comes back to remembering things, and that's rule number 3, easy to remember, it's really easy to remember if they're catchy and short, okay? So there's the thing. And then the next thing is, and this really, really annoys me, do not use numbers, hyphens, or special characters. Your podcast name should not be @podcast name, okay? That's so dumb. That's really dumb. So don't do that, okay? Now, the last thing is, don't put the word, I put work, let me correct that. Don't put the word podcast in your name. Come on, guys, please. Don't call it the Happiness Podcast, okay? Sometimes it works. Most of the times, it does not work. If you're a famous person, then you can go ahead and put, like Joe Rogan's podcast. But still, don't put podcast in your name unless it works. It should not be something like How Farmers Grow Corn podcast. God, please, no. Okay? So you got to keep those things in mind when you're thinking of your name and even your domain name. Now, the next thing is, your domain name does not have to match your podcast name, okay? It does not have to match it word for word, but it should be very similar. So if you're, let's say your podcast is Happy Dose Podcast, okay? So if that's your podcast name, then don't go and, let's say, Happy Dose .com is not available. So maybe you want to go ahead and make it happydosepodcast.com. So that's okay because it's very similar and we kind of get the point across, right? So, a lot of questions I get is, how do I know if my podcast name is available? How do I know if my domain name is available? So I'm going to show you. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new tab here. I'm going to go to GoDaddy.com. So when I go on GoDaddy.com, let's just go ahead and use the Happy Dose example. So what I'm going to do is Happy Dose, and I'm just going to hit enter. And as you can see, it costs a lot of money. So first of all, I'm not going to pay that much. You can see that happydose.com is available. So what I'll do is I'll just go ahead, copy this, and go on here, and make sure that this is not a podcast. As you can see, it's for sale, so it's probably, there's not a podcast out there that uses this. So my next thing is, I'm not spending this much money, and I really do want a .com, okay? And we'll talk about this in a second. So I'm going to search up Happy Dose Podcast. So Happy Dose Podcast is available. And what I'm going to do is just go ahead, copy this again, and then search it here. And as you can see, no one has taken it. There's nothing about it. And it just popped up saying it cannot find that domain name. So this is something I would get. And again, now I know that Happy Dose and podcast is available, so I can name my podcast Happy Dose. So that's kind of like the thought process that you want to go through when you're coming up with your name. Now, remember I said do not get a podcast host website, okay? So any host that you get, and we'll talk about podcast hosts in the next module, but any of those websites that they provide you, you don't want to get. And here's why you don't want to get. Number one, you don't own it. Now, I shouldn't have to even give you any more examples of why you shouldn't go this route. If you don't own something, what's the point, right? This is your podcast. This is your baby. You're going to grow it. You're going to take it to the next level. You're going to get listeners. You might make a lot of money with this. So why would you not want to own that, right? So you do want to own it. Number one thing, you do not own it when you create a website from your podcast host company. Next thing is you can't really change it. Okay, so maybe you can change the wording, this and that, but these are templates. So you can't really change it to match your color, your style, your scheme, and that just doesn't work well. Next thing is it's not creative or unique. There's going to be hundreds and thousands of people using your podcast host company. And if they all have websites from your podcast host, then they're all going to look the same. So how is that different? How is that going to make you stand out? And the next thing, again, because you can't change it, you can't make it unique, and it's not creative, it's not going to speak for your brand, right? So when you make a cover art, you're going to pick some colors, you're going to pick a logo, you're going to pick something. That should be transparent on your website. Those same colors, those same logos, everything. That way, when someone goes on your website and they see it, they'll be like, wow, okay, so this is the same podcast I was listening to. They don't have to ask, hey, is this website the same one for that podcast or not? So your brand has to come across, and it won't. The next thing is long URL. So let's say you're with some podcast host company. It'll be like podcasthost.com / website / group / this and then / it's going to be way too long, guys. No one can remember that URL. Maybe you can put it on your domain name. Few companies do allow that. But again, it's going to be so long. I'm already getting a headache thinking about it. Now, the next thing is, these companies are there to host your podcast. They're not there to make websites. They're not there to pretty much help you grow on the internet. So their loading time is going to be very slow. So when someone goes on there and they try to listen to your podcast, and if it takes them hours and hours to load anything on your website, why would they stay? Think about it. If you go to a website and it starts loading slow and slow and slow, don't you get frustrated and you just want to leave? Exactly. That's what's going to happen here. So remember, you don't want to have a website from your podcast host company. That's not what they're in there to do. They're there to host your podcast, which they'll do wonderfully. But everything else, I wouldn't want to do it that way. Now, the next thing is, okay, you understand you shouldn't have a podcast host website. But, what are the benefits of owning your own website? Well, number one, it's in the word. It's your own website, right? You own it. So this is your website for you. You can do whatever you want to do on it. You can control it. You can make it transparent with your brand, your logos, your colors, all that type of stuff. Now, the next thing is, again, going back to having a website and why it's important, is there's a few things you can do on your website to kind of help your podcast grow and, send more listeners to your website. Now, just think about it. Whenever you're trying to go to a restaurant or go watch a movie, what's the first thing that you do? You get on maybe your phone, even your laptop, your computer, and you go on Google and you search, hey, what's the best food place around here? And mostly it pops up stuff like on Yelp. It might pop up a blog. It might pop up this and that. And that's where you kind of get your idea of where you want to go to eat, right? And that's what most people do. They will go on Google and they will search, best podcast for entrepreneurs, best podcast for, self-help and stuff like that. And, we want to make sure that your website pops up on there. That's why, it's really important to have a website. And with that, we can actually help grow your website or grow your podcast. So the first thing is blogs. So you want to be kind of blogging on your website, just talking about same stuff you talk about on your podcast, but in a written form. That way, Google can find, the information on there and display it for people. Next thing is you can capture leads on your website. Now, we'll talk about this in a little bit, but it's important to have where people can sign up, either for your newsletter or notifications and stuff, and you get their email address. That way, you can send them information about your podcast. You can ask them to share your podcast, and it just makes things easier. And number one, it's so much easier when you can communicate with your listeners and your subscribers, right? If they click subscribe on an Apple Podcast app or Google Play or even Spotify, there's no way for you to know if they're actually listening to your podcast. No way to know if they think, hey, your sound quality is like this and this, or hey, can you talk about this or that? There's no way for you to know unless you have their emails and you're sending them information about your podcast, and they can reply back and say, hey, this and that. And we'll talk about that in a second, but just understand it's important, and it's going to help your podcast grow. And the only place you can do this is on your website. And the last thing is driving traffic. More people that land on your website, which is a lot more compared to a podcast app, they're going to go and listen to your podcast. It's going to help, like I said, it's going to pop up on Google. It's going to do this and that. So it's really going to help. So we want to make sure that you do have a website, okay? And it's going to help you grow your podcast. Now, the next thing is building websites. Now, again, being in the age that we are, most people know how to build a website. But if you want to get it professionally done, you can go to websites like Wix.com or Squarespace, or even Fiverr and Upwork. So I showed you Fiverr earlier in another module. Same thing, you can go on there, search for websites, and people are there building websites for as little as $5. Or you can go to Wix, and I'll show you right here, Wix.com. It's super simple, super easy to build a website on here as well. So, it's just drag and drop, and, it's for a small price. You can put in your own domain and use it that way, okay? So very simple and easy. But I'm going to give you a free way on how I do it and how I think you should do it as well. So number one, let me go ahead and X out of Wix up here. Now I'm going to scroll down. So here's the first step. First step is to go on GoDaddy and buy your domain name. Okay, so just like this, I would go ahead and buy this domain name by clicking add to cart and purchasing it. Okay, so that's number one thing that I would do. Number two, just remember there's a lot of small companies out there that are selling domain names for like $1.99 and stuff like that. The problem with these small companies is if they don't make enough money, they'll go out of business. And what happens is the domain name is registered through them. And if they go out of business, then you can lose that domain name. Okay? So don't go to small companies. I trust GoDaddy, and as you can see, it's $2. And there are some other domain names that you can get even for $1. As you can see, .us is for $1. Stick to .com, but come on, it's $2. GoDaddy's been around for, so many years that they're not going to go out of business. Okay, guys? So your domain name is safe and secured with GoDaddy. With small companies, it's not. Now, the next thing is when you have a website, you have to host the website somewhere, right? So it displays out to the world. So what I would recommend is go to companies like Hostmite or HostGator and get it. So let me show you. So I'm going to go to hostmite.com. So I'm going to go on here. I'm going to let it load. And then as you can see, this is where you can get hosting. Hosting starts super low. These are dedicated servers, which you don't really need. So go to share hosting. And then you can get this one right here. It's $5 a month, guys. It gives you unlimited storage, all this stuff, and really you're just going to have one domain name. So go ahead, get this, and get it ready. Okay, so that's all you need to do. So that's the step. Now, there are some free, hosting out there. So if you just go to Google like this, so go to google.com. And then on Google, you go ahead and search, free website hosting. So if you go here, there's a lot of companies that will pop up. As you can tell, there's a lot of free hosting. There's hosting for $1 and stuff like that. But, you might be wondering, why would I pay monthly for hosting if I can get it for free? Now, when you pay monthly for hosting, number one thing that you're going to get is security. Okay, you don't want somebody to hack your website. You don't want your website to end up on, whitelisted from other companies and stuff like that. Okay, so you want to make sure you have security. Number two, you're going to get fast loading websites. When you buy websites from hosting from places like Hostmite and stuff like that, it will make sure that your website loads fast. When you do free hosting, there might be 100 websites on that server, maybe 1,000 websites. So kind of slow it down for you. And the next thing is on free hosting, they're going to limit your space. So if you upload your podcast on here, or if you upload, big pictures, like nice pictures, it's going to kind of, take up the space. So you're going to run out of space. Last thing is, if you're already paying for hosting, you'll be able to scale up your podcast as it grows, So that way you don't have to worry about it later on. You don't have the headache. You're doing it correctly from the beginning. So guys, remember, I'm going to say it again. You need to buy a domain name. Then you need to get website hosting to host your website on there. Now, the next thing is installing WordPress. Now, what WordPress is it's pretty much, technical term is an open source where you can build a website. But really, it's pretty much a dashboard that allows you to build websites by uploading themes, plugins, and stuff like that. Now, super easy to do is go on YouTube. So just like this, I'm going to go to youtube.com. And then I'm going to go on here and I'm going to search how to use WordPress. Okay, how to use WordPress. Look at this, 24 steps. Okay, how to do WordPress. There's so many tutorials and it's super easy. But the cool thing is, I'm going to go to WordPress. Right here, go to wordpress.org. And when you go to wordpress.org, you can download it. See, you can click on Get WordPress. And you can download it by right here. And it downloads for completely free. You don't even have to pay. And it's super easy because you can go to go get themes. So you can do WordPress themes. and you can either pay for these themes or there are free themes on here. And as you can see, only one theme popped up, but as you can see, there's so many themes on here, and you can just upload this theme on once you install WordPress, and then you can change it. It's super easy to change. Again, there's some of them are drag and drop, and it just makes it easy, right? It's free, it's easy, it's super simple to kind of change and make it your own. So guys, that would be my step. That's how I would do it. So let's just go ahead and recap. I know there was a lot in this module. Again, you can download the resource right now, and you can go through it yourself as well. So here it is. So the first thing is you need to have a website, okay? You need to have a website. When picking your podcast name and domain name, let's go ahead and make sure it's short and simple. It's catchy, easy to remember. Remember, don't put podcast in it. Try to avoid it. If you have to, sometimes it does work out. Don't add numbers or hyphens and all that type of stuff. And then follow all these rules, okay? You need to understand, shouldn't have your podcast host website. You should have your own website so you can control it and make it your own. And then there's, of course, this awesome free way to do it with WordPress. Again, guys, if you're confused about any of this, look on the resources. I will include a whole resource for you guys. You can download this document, read through it, and pretty much go step by step right here to installing and creating your website.
Hey, if you enjoyed this video, guess what? We got more of this, but exclusively to our YouTube subscribers. So all you have to do to access those content is hit that red button, and we're gonna go ahead and give you access to our exclusive content right here on YouTube. Subscribe right now. And did you know we have a Facebook group? Amazing, right? It's on the description bio. I'll see you there. Have an amazing day.